Welcome to the Homeschool Together podcast. Where one working mom and a stay-at-home dad help you navigate the nuts and bolts of the growing and dynamic world of homeschooling.
With a focus on early learners, like me.
All the ins and outs of building and maintaining your homeschool life.
Homeschool.
Find out tips and tricks to make things like this easier.
I'm reading.
And ultimately, enjoy educating your kids. And what's that last thing?
Have fun together. Did I do good, Daddy?
Yeah, you did, sweetie. Good job. Live from the Homeschool Utopia Network, this is Homeschool Together. It's a beautiful day.
You are so funny.
Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together. Thank you for joining us. I'm a little giddy today. We had a good basketball game, first season of the game.
First season of the game?
First game of the season. And my voice is hanging on by a thread because Mr. Matt is a very animated coach, barking orders and yelling things. And so, not bad things, encouraging things. But we hope you are having a good weekend. And if you have a chance, head down to the show notes below. Think about leaving us a review on iTunes and helping other people find us if they are looking for a homeschool podcast that is secular and full of information. Ariel, today we are talking about workbooks, my favorite thing, our oldest's worst nightmare. We are talking about workbooks and the things that we're using for workbooks, how we're using workbooks, how you can use workbooks, and a lot of the kind of the pros and cons associated with that.
Yeah, we have really used workbooks a lot in the last couple of years in our homeschool. It used to be the thing that I really felt like workbooks was
Say it, Ariel.
It was like the lazy thing to do.
Oh, so lazy.
You know what I mean? Like, I just
call me the laziest homeschool dad on the planet.
Well, I just kind of felt like it was like so hands off, like, hey, let's just hand her a workbook. And so when our daughter was, starting this in preschool and then we get into kinder and stuff, I just really never wanted to use workbooks because I always thought it was kind of just like a cop out. Like, you're like, well, I'm just going to give her a workbook for this and she can do it on her own. Like, almost like it was busy work. And then
there's a little bit of that.
We started to do Explode the Code, which has a very much a workbook style. And I was like, this is interesting. Like, it actually, our older daughter kind of loved it. She really likes workbooks, and our little one especially likes workbooks. And so we started thinking about workbooks a little bit differently then and going, maybe in the whole, cornucopia of homeschooling options, there is maybe a place for workbooks. And we now have really embraced that. And there's a few specific areas of our homeschool that we really like to use workbooks. So we wanted to kind of delve into it and, let you all know, especially if you're new homeschoolers, that it's not necessarily a cop-out. There are times when a workbook is very appropriate.
Yeah, so let's talk about the good things about workbooks. I think from my standpoint, if you're approaching homeschool and you're looking to solve a problem, whatever that might be, some gap that you've identified, something that maybe isn't your strong point that you maybe want to try and do, especially in these early years, it provides you that structure and that organization. A lot of these workbooks, if you find some good ones, they are aligned to standards, if that is an important thing for your reporting in your state. I know there are some states that require you to cover all the subjects, and some of those subjects are art, or sometimes they're geography. And it's like, how the heck do I teach geography? And so getting a grade appropriate book that is aligned to standards and that you can then can help solve those like kind of corner case needs for any type of homeschool that requires a little bit more reporting or a little bit more requirements. But even in those states where they don't, I find them to be very helpful, especially if you're trying to tackle some type of subject that maybe you just don't know how to approach history with a first grader, or social studies,
Right.
with
What
a
do we
second
do
grader.
with
Yeah.
a second grader? I like it. They're very clear. It's like, we've done a couple of really good ones, done a couple of great. Evan Moore is one of our favorite workbook
Yeah,
companies.
we've done a lot of reviews on our YouTube channel, so check them out there
Yeah,
as well.
and we love like the skill sharpeners and things, and we've done some of the STEM ones, and they're very concise. It's like a short lesson. They're usually very colorful and engaging, and it's very clear, like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And there's something really satisfying, like you say, especially when you get one that's like, first grade geography, and you finish it, you're like, hey, check that box. I covered that, geography appropriate for that age of what, at least the curriculum company thinks we should cover for that subject.
And sometimes, like, when you think geography is a great example, we think, oh, we got to start teaching countries and styles of land masses and type of bodies of water. In those early years, kindergarten, first grade geography books, it's like, this is a school, this is a street,
Right.
Here's a mountain.
Let's map my house.
Yeah, exactly. And like
here's the directions, right? North and west and all these things.
Sometimes we overdo it because we're coming from the expectations of an adult.
I agree.
And we're not really thinking about these kind of iterative, progressive developments and learnings that is needed for the young ones, that they got to build that base level foundation. And workbooks are really good at doing that, really picking the grade appropriate stuff so that you don't have to go off and do it on your own.
Right.
I think the next thing that I really love about workbooks is really helpful is, when we have these early learners, it's very hands-on for us. Workbooks can be one of those first moments, those first, situations where we can start to cultivate a little bit of independent learning, independent actions.
And when we have multiple kids,
very helpful.
This is the thing. And now we do use workbooks this way. It's a great opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to work with your sister for a minute. Please do your handwriting workbook. And it's something that we can just open up and go to. So that independence is, I think, a big one, especially even if you don't have multiple kids, right? So much of the curriculum that we do is really high touch, right? We're doing Right Start Math, and we're doing all about reading and everything. And we're doing literature-based curriculums for social studies. So it's like, it's all like very time intensive, kind of one-on-one with the parent.
The high touch curriculums.
Right. Sometimes you just need a break. And so you're like, but I mean, like our little one, she just wants to keep going. She's like, okay, give me the next thing. Give me the next thing. It's like, here, do this workbook for a minute. I'm just going to take a 5-minute break and you do that page, right. So there's something really nice about that.
Well, we notice that a lot when we do the joiner curriculums, where we'll do, a Right Start Math level, and then we follow it up with a Math Mammoth level. Math Mammoth is a math workbook style curriculum. Because she had done a lot of math and she had a lot of the concepts underneath her belt, when we go back and do the review, it's a workbook based, and I can go ahead and give that to her and say, well, you really clearly know how to add 2-digit numbers together vertically. You can go off and do these 10 problems, and then come back to me when you're done. I really started doing that in like that first grade level, because she was right. Yeah, she could look at it and go, oh yeah, I know exactly how to do these problems. And she just goes ahead and does them. That was kind of like the first moment where it was like, there wasn't a lot of pressure on like, this is now your independent learning cycle, start to learn on your own. It was really taking things that she's really good at, driving mastery, and using workbooks to help start that process. And now, now she's in third grade and at the third grade level, and we have a whole suite of books that I can just hand to her, that for her to be able to do that independent learning. And I think another wrinkle about the independent learning is, in a lot of these workbooks, there's a lot of built-in reading skills that are required to do them, whether you're doing a science workbook. I have one. I have the 180 Days of Science. I did a review on it. I'll put the review link down below that you can check it out. And it's so funny because it's talking about science concepts, but it's like 80% reading and writing. And so it's really like, I find workbooks have that kind of cross functionality built into them, where it might be something around, like a skill sharpener's book on geography. In that book, there's going to be writing and handwriting stuff, maybe some light reading, arts and crafts elements and things like that. And so there's kind of a cross-functional element with respect to those workbooks. They're not just, a lot of workbooks aren't just like singular focused of teaching X concept. They can touch many different domains on what you're trying to teach, and I find them to be they kind of complement work that we're doing. Things that I'm doing right now is really trying to drive her to be able to read directions, read large passages, read the various questions, because a lot of these workbooks we're doing now are multiple choice in nature, like the testing books and some of the writing and reading books. There's a little bit of multiple choice in there, and I'm preparing her for the standard testing that she has to do later this year, later this spring, coming up, where she's going to have those skills, and I can't be there to help her do that.
Right. She's got to be able to read all the prompts.
She's got to be able to read the prompts, read the passages, analyze the text, comprehend the text, read the questions, pick the right answers. I find those to be, and even in some of the, like the standardized testing books that I've done a review on those as well, and I'll put that link in the show notes. Sometimes there are some questions that are really, really difficult for her to understand. Like the comprehension is really hard. It's like, I'll read a whole story, right? And then there'll be all these steps that happen in the story. And then they'll give you step 1, they'll give you step 3, and then they'll give you a bunch of options. What happened in between these two things? Man, that's really been a curveball for her. She's like, she knows what to pick, but analyzing and understanding what that question is asking her to think. It's not that she doesn't know the answer. It's not that she can't find the answer. That is such a complex question to understand. What is this thing asking me to do? Those are some really powerful skills that I have noticed that are coming through these workbooks that I'm working in, that I don't think I would have ever given her as well on our own, like doing our own type of stuff. So these are really cool, like independent learning things that come through these workbooks. And it's like, don't undersell this independent learning, trying to figure things out. A little bit of perseverance and grit involved in there as well. And that's been something that I've really enjoyed as kind of like a nice pro about these workbooks.
I agree. One of the great things for us too is that workbooks are really portable.
Oh, man.
So
yeah.
Other than some that are science-based or something and that have set up an experiment, workbooks are inherently a great on-the-go solution. You can take them to the car. We've taken them to the dentist and the doctor, and I've taken them to the chiropractor with me. And we take them to school when we know that one child has a class and the other one doesn't have a class. It's a great thing to say, hey, why don't you work on this workbook? You're volunteering in one of the classes this year, and our older daughter doesn't have a class during that time while our younger does. And our older daughter comes and sits in that class, and you're like, great, this is time for you to do your workbooks, because she was able to just bring them in her backpack. So they're really great grab and go if you travel a lot, or you find that you're, always at sports practices and games and things for different kids. Like, workbooks are great for that because there's so few materials needed. Well,
and I see this all the time at our parent partnership, where we have about 1,000 kids, and I have to see all these parents, and a lot of times you're like, it's almost like everyone's kind of like scoping out what everyone else brings. What curriculum are you using? It's kind of funny to watch that. And I can't tell you, like we said at the beginning of this podcast, we thought, workbooks are kind of a cop-out. Man, it's almost like 95% of parents I see at our school have some type of workbook-based piece of curriculum
for something.
And it could be a handwriting curriculum, or like an actual writing curriculum where the kids are reading a book and then they're doing some literacy-based writing activities, whatever that might be. I've seen it everywhere. And
we're not the only ones that bring it to dance class. While one kid's dancing, the other one's working a workbook, and there's several kids in the line who are there because the sibling has dance and they're doing a workbook.
And it's just so portable. You're right. It's so easy to bring along.
Yeah, it's really great for that reason. The other thing about it is they're usually pretty affordable. So this is a pro, but also I just want to give a little gotcha. I know this isn't our pros section, but they are pretty affordable. You can usually get workbooks for, sometimes even they're under $10, but like $8 to 15 or $16, somewhere in there, you can usually get workbooks. So really affordable. But they don't often provide like an entire year's worth of instruction in a subject. Now, if it's a side kind of subject like geography, for example, great. Yeah, that would be maybe your whole year's worth of geography for, first grade or whatever it is. But when it comes to some of the other things, they're more seen as supplements. And so you may need to, like, let's say we used workbooks one year for science. And so we had several different science workbooks. Well, we ended up stringing together like 5 or 6 workbooks. And then all of a sudden we could have bought a $75 science curriculum. So just be aware that, while workbooks are really awesome and they are cheap, their lifespan is not as long as a full curriculum. And so depending on what subject it is and whether or not you're going to have to keep buying new ones to fill up, a core subject, maybe it isn't the most affordable option. So just to keep that in mind.
I think that's a great point, that sometimes we want to think as workbooks as replacements for curriculum. Now there are some, like in a kind of if you take the explode the code route and you go ahead and get all the levels that pertain to that year and the half levels, as well as like the the beyond the code as well, and you kind of wrap everything together. Absolutely, it can be a full curriculum. That's your ELA curriculum, and you could do a great thing, and it totally work. But a lot of times you're right, when you are approaching these type of workbooks, unless they are saying like, we even have a bunch that are like full set, first grade curriculum, and it's like 800 pages long. We have a couple of those, and it is everything you need in that one curriculum. But I don't know how much we want to rely on like a single, $25 workbook that says it's a complete first grade curriculum as our base of everything we do.
But I mean, hey,
I don't know.
If you want to do that as your base and then you supplement and extend, that's great.
Yeah.
Oftentimes though, these workbooks, unless it is a workbook-based curriculum like Explode the Code. And I think
or a Math Mammoth or something like that.
Yeah, and we should really kind of clarify. That's not really what we mean by a traditional workbook, because that's a curriculum. That's a full curriculum that they just happened to subdivide into books. Yeah. And that's the same thing with Math Mammoth. It really is just a full curriculum. The style is a little workbooky, but we're really talking more about your like independent, hey, I bought a skill sharpeners workbook, I bought a handwriting workbook, those kind of things. And most of the time they are there to supplement your curriculum. We have reading and math workbooks. They're there just to give some practice, give a different flavor or style for our daughter to see. We're not like replacing her 3rd grade reading with one of these workbooks, but it's a great way to give her some extra practice that's outside of, her all about reading and explode the code work. So
yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Sometimes you find these like nice little practice workbooks if you're doing multiplication, and they'll have like 30 pages of multiplication problems. A lot easier than you going out and generating your own or handwriting your own. It's just a nice little thing that you can do like within your normal curriculum flow and say, okay, here we go. Let's do 5 warm-up multiplication problems, and then we'll go ahead and get into our curriculum. I used to do that a lot, especially on the early days when she was just developing a lot of her early math skills. I don't do it as much anymore because Right Start has now kind of moved into more of a worksheet-based thing. So
as we get older.
As we're getting older, there's a lot of worksheets, and they have practice problems up at the top. So I kind of just lean in with those. Something that I also like I think as a pro about the workbooks is that you get immediate feedback on whether or not you're right or wrong.
Yeah, there's no like answer keys to try to find or whatever.
They tell you immediately, okay, yeah, this is the right answer, that's the right answer. They have the answer keys in the back, as you kind of said, and we know immediately if it's right or wrong. A lot of times the workbooks don't have open-ended things. Now, some of them do, but like, write a sentence about a question you would have for Peter from the story, that type of thing. But the most of the time we're talking about multiple choice type of answers or, very binary answers. So it's either right or wrong. And those are the type of things that I really like as feedback directly for the student, because they can pick the right answer and then, okay, I did it right. And I can move on and figure things out.
Yeah. And the biggest pro of all, in my opinion, is that workbooks are very easy. Yeah. For beginners, people who are, you're just starting out homeschooling, you're thinking about starting homeschool. Maybe you're in the process of planning some, great curriculum you're going to do. You're like, oh, I'm going to use Blossom and Root. It's going to be great. I'm going to do all these things and whatever. But in the meantime, you're not actually getting going because you're in the middle of planning or churning or you can't decide on a curriculum. Workbooks are easy.
Oh, yeah.
You just pick it up. You could prime it from Amazon. It'll be here in a day. And your kiddo can get started. They don't often require other materials. They are pretty easy to understand for you as a teacher to, teach the subject. They're laid out really clearly. There's not a lot of prep work you need to do for them. So they are the easiest option to pick. And if you're a beginner, especially for some of your not core subjects, just try a few workbooks, and they're not all created equal. Oh, no. I would definitely say that not all companies and not all styles are created equal, but there are lots of good ones out there, and they are just they're really easy. They don't require a whole ton of planning. They don't require a huge learning curve. They're pretty easy. And
something that, kind of key on an earlier podcast we did about motivation, I really like workbooks as kind of that, if you're looking to down regulate for your day, you're trying to maybe, pare down. Workbooks are a great way to just say, okay, fine, we're not going to do all the heavy stuff today, but at least we got some learning in. Workbooks are really easy to do that. Also,
it's really easy to see your progress too.
Exactly. And especially when we talked about the seasons of homeschooling, if you're thinking about your year as kind of seasons of homeschooling that you're, going through different phases, workbooks can be a great thing to do when you're not doing your regular curriculum. For example, if you don't really like to homeschool during the summer, you want to have it free, loose, and goosey and all that, have a good time, but you don't want to lose touch with, development, any type of gaps maybe that are happening. Or if you're a homeschooler in the summer, you go to a regular school, but you homeschool in the summer to help, close gaps on learning issues, or maybe you're trying to accelerate things. Using workbooks is kind of that thing in the summer or in the more, the slimmer time, like we were talking a little bit about.
Sometimes we'll do workbooks just at the holidays, because it's like we're so busy and we aren't going to do our regular show. It's like, hey, here's some workbooks. Let's do some of this. We'll at least get a few things done. Yeah,
like a baby's coming or whatever it might be, and it's like, okay, we're just going to do workbooks for the next 3 months. These are really cool ways for you to be able to incorporate them, not just maybe as a normal thing, but maybe as a special need.
Right. Well, hey, we're moving. I'm packing up all of our homeschool stuff, but we still want to do some work. Here's a workbook. Hey, we're going on a long trip. We're going to go in our RV for a month, and we're going to travel around. Grab some workbooks.
So let's go into a little bit of the cons. The first one I think is pretty obvious, is the lack of engagement. So lack of engagement from potentially two sides of that is one with the student. They tend to be very passive, just something that they're reading, trying to figure out the right answer and moving on. There's not a lot of churn with respect to concepts where you are questioning and answering and asking questions and, exploring concepts and ideas. A lot of times it's very passive in that nature. There's also an element of the parents not being necessarily involved a lot, and that can kind of breed a little bit of complacency if you overuse them, or you're sort of using workbooks to not then have to do direct homeschooling. Now, that's not saying that if your student loves workbooks and they do really well and they're kind of hands off, that doesn't mean you're not doing the right thing. But there is kind of like this, like, oh, just go do the workbooks,
Right. Yeah. We have to make sure that it's still engaging for our kids, because ultimately workbooks are limited in their adaptability. Oh, yeah. We can't, it is what you get. Now I kind of feel like if you're going to have to put effort into adapting a workbook to make it something that's more amenable to your kid, then your kid probably just doesn't like workbooks, and you might as well just do a different type of curriculum that offers something that would be more their style, rather than having to adapt, because workbooks aren't made for that. Like if you've read, I'm going to use Blossom and Root again as an example, but she talks in there about following rabbit trails and, picking and choosing, right? She gives tons of options, for the table learners this, for the science folks this, for the outdoor people this, for the media folks this, and she gives all these different flavors of how you could learn the same topic. Workbooks don't do that. This is the thing. It's going to teach you all about trees, and it's going to go through a couple things to learn about trees or the water cycle or whatever. It's going to ask you a few questions.
It may not be comprehensive enough.
Right. A lot of times they're fairly shallow in information, but I think for us, we've mostly done workbooks with lower elementary. So while we feel maybe it's shallow information and our kids could probably uptake more, it is also for like second grade. So, maybe it's appropriate. I'm sure that lots of people went into making these workbooks, but you're not going to be able to adapt them as well as other types of curriculum, because they're really not made for that.
Well, another thing too is it's kind of your over-reliance on worksheets. You're now all of a sudden you're not doing as many hands-on things. You're not doing as many projects. Maybe you're not doing as much exploratory reading or learning, and you're losing touch with kind of the various other ways you can gain knowledge if you are just solely doing a lot of workbooks.
It could just be an easy crutch because it's easy
Yeah.
and, it's pretty hands off. And especially if you have, really little ones running around or other things going on in life. And it's like, hey, we've got all these workbooks. Yeah, at some point you can get to be like, wow, you even said this to us. Like you said this to me, I don't know, like a month ago or maybe 2 months ago. You were like, I actually think I have too many workbooks. I'm going to scale back. I think I'm having her do too many workbooks. And I can see, and I used to say, hey, would you do a couple pages in each of your books? And she was happy with it and she liked it. But now I say it and she's like, ugh, and you're like, I think I piled on like too many workbooks because they're so easy. You're like, let's just add another one. No problem. Let's just put that in there too.
What's a page of handwriting? Yeah,
right. But it did start to wear on her. And so we did have to pull back a little bit and realize that we were over relying on the workbooks because they were so easy to implement.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Another thing we may neglect is kind of the environmental impact of using a lot of workbooks, and you think, that's not that bad. It's just a workbook or two. When you start thinking about, doing...
We have a lot of workbooks. We have a workbook graveyard upstairs.
We have a massive graveyard, and they're all single use, and you use them and you toss them out.
Now you could
recycle them and all that type of stuff.
Or you could totally like cut out the pages and put them in slick sheets and do them. And if you have multiple children and you want to do that, that's awesome. I think in some ways that kind of negates a lot of the pros of workbooks is that they're super easy and they're really portable and all these things. If you have to cut them up and, put them in slick sheets and then put them in a binder and all of that stuff and then pop them out when you want to go somewhere, maybe it takes away some of that. So yeah, we are kind of, turning and burning through through these books.
Another element too that maybe a like con is while they are cheap, and going back to what you said there a little bit earlier, is that they are kind of designed to be small snippets, and all of a sudden you go, oh man, it's only about $10 for this worksheet.
Yeah,
and,
it's really
and
easy.
then all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, we've done 20 workbooks in the last 2 years, and that's like, okay, we've spent $200, $300, $400 on workbooks. I'm like, well, have
we really spent $400 on work? I hope we haven't.
No, not that many.
Not that much.
I mean, let's see. Yeah, I mean, not that much.
Maybe not, but a few $100 on workbooks.
If we do 20, if I do 10 a year, that starts adding up.
Well, we easily do 10 a year.
Yeah.
So you're right. And so it's funny because we look at some of these curriculums too, and we're like $200 for that curriculum. This is too much. But then we have no problem shelling out $10 for a workbook, and we do it 20 times, and you're like, oh.
It's the app dilemma, right? It's like, I'm not going to pay $2.99 for an app. It was like, let's go to Starbucks and spend $9 on a cup of coffee. No problem. I'll do that every day.
Yeah, it is funny. It does add up, and you're right. Yeah. I think it's what I like about it is that, and I guess this was a pro we didn't say, so I'm kind of skipping back a little bit. My apologies, everybody, but it's just coming to me now. One of the things about it is it's a really cheap way to get a whole bunch of different subjects. Mm-hmm. It's a great way to get a little snippet of, we're supposed to teach, I think, 11 subjects in this state, and it's a great way to say, like, rather than having to make a mini curriculum for all of these different little pieces, I can just grab one workbook for each and work on them throughout the year. And boom, I've covered all these varied subjects. It's a great way to get lots of little things in. So that's one piece. But back to cons. The fatigue, the burnout.
Yeah, we just talked about that.
Overusing them is real. And definitely that happened to our kiddo. And I feel like they're definitely... their style is very school at home. Mm-hmm. So it's something that we always kind of avoid, right? We homeschool, we don't do school at home. And they're very much the same style. They're made by the same publishers that make stuff for schools.
And very often they're not solely designed. They're not solely designed for homeschoolers. They are designed to go into schools. They're designed to be supplementals.
Right, or a summer bridge stuff, or, something extra that you use. It's totally true. Any of these workbooks, I think, that I've seen, you could cut out that page and deliver it into a, second grade or third grade classroom, whatever our age that we're using, and I totally believe it. It totally looks like a worksheet that would be passed around in a school. So if that's not your style, if you're definitely wanting to not go that direction, just be aware that they aren't really designed, like you say, in a more kind of homeschool type manner. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Yeah,
I think we all understand it's not meant in the ways that we tend to do a lot of education or what we expect with curriculum that we purchase for our homeschool.
Right. Even if they're meant for homeschoolers, they're still not really done in a style that promotes that curiosity,
independent learning and all that.
going down rabbit holes and exploring extra things, taking it further, making it your own, adapting. All the things that we really love about homeschool curriculums is not really set up for that.
So let's talk a little bit about things maybe you should consider when you are looking for workbooks. I think the first thing when we're thinking about workbooks, we need to think about, well, why are we doing this? We're doing this for our learners. And we want to try and find workbooks that kind of fit in their learning styles that they like. Not that we want to do everything in a kinesthetic way or an auditory way. We know that while we have learners that like those type of styles, we do want to expose them to other things as well, and kind of the well-roundedness of the various, sensory ways of teaching. But we do know that our learners tend to prefer something, and especially when it's a workbook and we're asking them, early learners, to do it on their own, we may want to angle in a direction that they like to do certain things, and think about that when we are picking workbooks. Kinesthetic learners may want more STEAM type of books that have art and cutting and gluing and coloring and that type of stuff.
Science projects
and stuff like that. So
we're not going to be able to help the auditory learners much with workbooks. I haven't seen any. If you've seen some that work great with auditory learners, please shout out. Yeah. Otherwise, it's more going to be visual and, like you say, the kinesthetic, because there are some that involve cutting and gluing and outside materials and things and set you up. But I haven't seen anything yet that really thrives for auditory learners, at least in the workbook space.
Unless there's a kind of workbooks that have maybe apps or paired content that kind of comes with the workbook.
Let us know if you guys
seen something like that.
Seen something. Yeah, that would be really cool.
Next thing was you want to make sure that the workbooks align with your family homeschooling philosophy. Obviously, we all have very different homeschools. We have all very different reasons we homeschool. We want to make sure the workbooks, fit in that.
Right, because we can adapt it. So it's, does this fit your style? If you're really more of a kind of an unschooly style, and that's what you're looking for to follow their interests and things, that workbook might not be positioned correctly for you. So just really look at the type, and all the companies are different. So one of the places we actually really love to go, tip for deciding, we love to go to Barnes and Noble. Yeah. They have a huge wall of workbooks there. It's the largest collection of workbooks that I've seen in a physical location before, and it is a great place to browse for workbooks where you can really just flip through and see the insides of them. Now, we've shown quite a few workbooks on our YouTube channel, and we'll continue to, and we give full walkthroughs of those lessons so you can see what they look like. But if you have a Barnes and Noble nearby, that's a great place to go and take a look.
What I love about the wall is going there and perusing what she might be doing in the next year, or what are the expectations according to the standards-based workbook that aligns to whatever the state or national standards are. It's really cool to see and flip through and say, oh wow, she's not ready for this. I would want to downgrade to the previous year. And it really tells me, okay, these might be some gaps. I love looking through those books and seeing gaps in what we're doing, and maybe trying to fill those holes or shore up certain things. I just love flipping through them. It's like the only place you get to do that.
Yeah, that, and in the late spring, if you go to Costco, they have a great selection of workbooks because they're gearing up for everyone to buy things for their kids to do over the summer. So you'll find lots of like summer bridging stuff and like Brain Quest workbooks, but you'll also find some of like complete first grade or complete second grade. That's the time of year. So even if you don't, you're not sure if you want to do workbooks, you just want to check them out, that's also a great place to go at that time of year. The Barnes and Noble thing is like all the time, but if you can go in the late spring, we always really enjoy going to Costco, and the kids get all excited, like, Mom, Dad, the workbooks are here. We spend some time in the book section, so it's fun.
Well, speaking of Costco, when you are going for your workbooks, you want to make sure you understand your budget and what you're
and how many workbooks you're going to need through your year. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And just figuring out, because believe it or not, a lot of times when you get some of the early learner books, you tend to burn through them pretty quickly. Like, oh, it's 180 pages, but it's like, no, you can do 3 pages in 15 minutes pretty quickly. We're doing the 180 Days of Science workbook, and like what they expect you to do on one day is like literally 2 minutes worth of work.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
if we only spend 2 minutes, they're going to learn nothing. So it's like, I need to do like 3 or 4 pages in a sitting, and then we don't do anything for a couple more days, and then we go ahead and do another one. You got to really like gauge what you're doing and how fast you want to move through it. I feel that 180 days book, if we just did 2 or 3 pages a day, we would move through it in, a couple months.
Yeah.
It can go pretty quickly if you're doing workbooks, especially every day, like a handwriting book. I find we churn through that really fast. Our test prep book that we're doing is going pretty quick because she does 2 or 3 pages a day, and it's only like, 100 pages. And so in 30 days, in a month or a month and a half, she's gone through an entire year of test prep. And, in this respect, if you're trying to catch somebody up, that's a good thing, right? Because you go through it in 2 months. Great. We've done first grade. Let's go ahead and do second grade. Great. Let's now do third grade. Great. Let's now do fourth grade. Now I've caught you up to where you might need to be. Let's see if you have any other gaps. I've done that with the test prep book where I've gone like first grade, second grade. We're getting to the end of second grade. Now I'm going to have her do third grade so that she's prepared in the content. I've just progressively made it more challenging, but in a manner that allows her to go mastery. Well, that's 3 workbooks. That's $50 that I've just spent, right? Like you got to think about your budget and how you're using them. The price can all of a sudden, you find out like, oh my God, I spent a lot of money on Amazon this week for workbooks.
It's a great thing too for something like spelling or whatever, like you say, the catch up, I think, but really thinking about, how much you're going to do over the span of the whole year is a really important consideration. The other thing is, how well does a workbook or this workbook that you're looking at fit the subject that you want to do, right? So a spelling workbook's a good example. That would be a good one. Math or grammar.
Writing as well.
Yeah, but maybe not art or, it's just like, how well does it, I feel like these are companies that are out there to make money, and they will do a workbook about anything.
Really will. I think they will. Yes.
They will do a workbook about everything, anything and everything, even if it like doesn't really hit the spirit of the subject. So just your mileage may vary with that. Just take a good look at it. Just because they made a workbook about it doesn't mean it's a good workbook. So, be discerning.
Another thing that I like about, when you're thinking about workbooks, think about flexibility. Are you willing to supplement workbooks with other methods? Something that you could do is, oh, my child needs a lot of manipulatives. Well, maybe you're doing a math workbook that you can have a manipulative kit that goes with it. Or if you're doing a phonics, kit and you're doing a lot of manipulatives and physical things. I just watched a video about literacy methods. I'll put it in the show notes below. And it was really, really cool about like basic phonics using manipulatives. It's like you can imagine having like a little travel kit that goes with your phonics workbook that you can do things with. Think about like what type of flexibility you can wrap around a workbook to, accentuate things that are being done and bring a little bit more touch. Think about that type of flexibility as well when you're thinking about workbooks. Don't just necessarily think, oh, this is something they're going to consume on their own. You can make it whatever you want it to be. And you can build on workbooks. You can have a workbook almost like a spine within a curriculum that you do work around. Maybe another unit study here, another unit study here. And all of a sudden, you're starting to build together a nice little curriculum surrounding a series of workbooks, right? So think creative, think flexible when you're thinking about those things. You
absolutely can. You can't really adapt the workbook much, but you're right. You can definitely supplement around it. Just take a good critical look at, how much work you're going to put in to, build this custom thing around, and whether or not it might be worth it to just purchase a more comprehensive curriculum. It's something that you have to weigh for yourself. There's some folks out there who are all about the DIY. They're always going to DIY. And so, you do you and go for that. And there's others who really like something that's just laid out, and the thought of having to keep adding onto it and supplementing is going to get stressful. So, your mileage may vary.
Well, especially if like you're a parent partnership or you have some type of charter co-op or whatever that has access to workbooks as materials that they can print off. I know I think we just had a question on YouTube. They're like, well, how did you get the print off of Explode the Code? It's not available. And I'm like, oh yes, we have a site license at our school and they can print things off for us. And I'm like, we should be a little bit more mindful of that. But in reverse, if you have, resources available that they can print things off for you, that is such a powerful feature that may drive you towards using the workbooks because it's available, it's free, it's something you can build off of. Be flexible. Try to find what works best for you guys.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So can we make workbooks more, effective?
Right. You talked a little bit about combining workbooks with hands-on activities and experiments. That's always a great way. The next thing is to avoid using them as your sole source,
I
right?
agree on that, yeah.
That's maybe for short snippets of time. And you talked about, sometimes when you're having a new baby or something, when workbooks can be great to rely on. But in general, they're not meant to be, even though it says complete first grade curriculum, they're not really meant to be your full thing. So, and
you know what? I like using those as a mastery thing where you feel,
Yes.
oh, okay, I did everything I was supposed to do this year for second grade. We've quote unquote passed second grade and now we're in the summer. I really don't want to do anything. You get one of those all-in-one curriculums and you just have them do a couple pages, which is essentially a review of what they've done from the year. It's easy. It's super quick. They get a lot of confidence and they build that mastery, and you can get one of those done at the end of the year. And then you can kind of sit back and rest assured and say, okay, this book says they're aligned with all the standards. My child just did the entire book. I feel confident that my child is ready for second grade, whatever that might be.
Right. And you can fill in any gaps that you might not have known that you were missing. Now, the whole standards thing is it's a whole thing. It's a can of worms. It's just fraught with all kinds of problems because there's national standards and there's state standards. And so when we say the workbook aligns with standards, it's a loose thing. It may align with some Common Core standards, but there aren't standards for everything. So
Not every state has adapted a Common Core standards.
Right. And so
Most of them have, but not all of them.
right. So you take the whole standards thing with a grain of salt and look into that. If the standards are really important to you, for us, it's more guidelines. So,
but if it's important for you on your reporting, if you have some level of reporting, obviously that is something that's important to you, and it's important to the state, for you to allow you to continue to homeschool.
Right. Yeah. So if it's really important to you, make sure that you check and see, hey, when this workbook says it aligns with standards, what standards are those? And really, do your homework there to make sure, because not all standards are created equal in every place. So your mileage definitely varies on that one.
And a lot of times the standards are really complicated to read and listen to.
They are.
If you really want to understand a standard, in my limited experience in my master's degree, everybody take a knee. I am literally having to go out and find standards, and I have to write learning objectives towards these standards.
Yeah.
The state standards tend to be a lot better than the national standard. National standard tends to be like amorphous blob. The state standards actually are a little bit more spelled out, and they very often will give you examples of what they mean by this. Like, here's an example of what a student could do or a teacher could do for that student. The state standards, if you just search whatever state you are, we're in Washington. So Washington, it's OSPI. And they will have it printed out for you and really nice little details. I had to do one yesterday about art standards. There's like a 5th grade art standard. And they gave you good examples of what they expect at this type of thing. So if you're looking to decode standards, your state standard offices for the education will give you a lot better, window into what they mean by those things.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So next thing would be to get high quality books. I know there are some workbook creators, I'm looking at you, Kuman, who will repeat the same 3 or 4 pages of activities for 100 straight pages.
Yeah.
While they may be visual, they can get boring and repetitive. And so try to find, like, we love Evan Moore. You could have a 120-page Evan Moore book and maybe not see the same activity on any page.
They do a good job.
They do a really good job. But then you may have like a standards book, like the standard prep book that we do with the Harcourt Family Press. And that is very repetitive, but that's because it's a standardized test type of thing. So you got to really kind of pick and choose. But I really like things that are they don't have repeated activities, and they're very visual.
Right. Even if they're repeating the same skills,
Yep.
If it's different visuals and things and it's presented in a slightly different way, that really helps us to avoid burnout. I mean, that's one of the biggest things is, just watching that we take enough breaks from workbooks. Yep. We try to do, I don't know how many we're doing right now. I think we have like 4 workbooks. Five. Okay. We don't do them all every day. We do them on different days. Yeah. We encourage taking breaks. I think that's a big piece of it. And the last thing too is workbooks are set up for you to kind of follow the formula. but we really like to encourage our kids to kind of think outside the box a little bit. If they're doing a workbook and it's something that they're really enjoying, our little one will grab markers and color in the pictures.
100%.
Or she'll doodle, or she'll take her workbook and then she'll grab drawing paper and she'll use it to kind of like copy a drawing of something, or, they're interested in something in their workbook, we'll take it further. We really encourage our kids to not just kind of like automaton, just follow the rules and do this exactly, so just think about that a little bit if you're going to choose workbooks. And if you're looking for great workbooks, you can find a lot of great workbook recommendations on our website. It's homeschool-together.com, and we are doing reviews on our YouTube channel, and we're going to slowly work our way through all the workbooks that we have and that we really enjoyed, and try to get that information to you all. So hopefully this was helpful. And if you haven't given workbooks a chance yet, because you thought it was the easy way out, maybe you'll give them a shot, because I think there's definitely a place for them in our homeschool, and maybe there's a place for them in yours. Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook, and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
Happy homeschooling!